I know the hot topic will be, or some of the hot topic other than the draft will be Dexter. Just a quick update on that for you guys. We've had good conversations with his representatives throughout the last 5 or 6 days. Coach, Dawn, myself, we've all been in communication, trying to find some resolution. I'll echo what Coach said last week. We'd like for Dexter to be here, and at some point we'll come to a resolution here. Whatever that may be, we'll see. But conversations have been really good. They've been productive, and again, we'll see what happens here down the road. But I'm not going to say any more about it after that. But that's the update. That's really all there is. So, with that being said, I'll open it up for any questions.
Look at the first round of the draft then as a deadline with Dex to get something done, because if you were going to move, if you're going to grant his request, you would want something for this year's team. So does that act as an unofficial deadline?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into it on if there's deadline or not. He's under contract for 2 more years, so we're not going to put any deadlines on anything. Again, right now, productive conversations, and we'll see where it goes.
So, are you entertaining offers? Are you listening to offers when teams call about him, or is that you're trying to figure out somebody to keep him here?
Yeah, I'm always going to pick up the phone. So if team calls, maybe not to the effect that Coach said last week that everybody is tradable. But no, that is my job as a general manager. If teams call, you take into account it's case by case basis and what the compensation may be, and that's my job to take into consideration what that looks like, what the compensation looks like, who the player is, how that affects the roster, and then try to make the best decision off of that.
How has this trade request impacted the way you're approaching the draft?
It really hasn't. It really hasn't. We're going to continue to go through our process. The scouts left yesterday, so they'd been here for roughly 14 days, and so now we're putting the final touches on the board. But it really hasn't affected how we're approaching the draft.
Joe, there's always that expression, best available player, and that we'll look for that as a staff. Are you looking for that, or are you looking for ways that you need things? Are you addressing needs? How do you kind of balance that?
Ideally, they line up. And the best available player is also a position in need. But I would say last year, if you look at what we did with Abdul, we had Kayvon and we had Burns here, and we still took Abdul. So we were really strong at outside backer when we added Abdul to the roster. So similar, we're going through. We're going to stack the board, and the best player available is the direction we'll go.
The sheer volume of players that enter the draft, how do you view draft picks in terms of just the collecting of talent and bringing it to your roster?
In terms of how many picks we have, or just having more picks overall?
Just having picks overall. Like, you don't treat one different than the other.
Yeah, I guess, my first year you get more swings. Again, more swings, the better chances of hitting, so, and it also allows you to build depth, at different parts of the draft. You'd like them for all to become starters, but there are certain parts of the draft where you're looking for either special teams or depth pieces if somebody gets injured. So I look at all those as it's an avenue for us to upgrade the roster at different levels throughout the draft. And ideally, when you go into it, you want to find somebody that's going to be able to help you in the short term and the long term, ideally.
How unique, just philosophically, as an evaluator, when do you move off of your initial evaluation? Seeing that a player comes out here and played maybe a year or two, when does that move off the original evaluation you had as a prospect?
You're saying if they come to the league and they're better or worse than what we...
Change your mind.
Was it a guy we drafted or a guy in the league, or just in general? Well, yeah, it's predicated on how the player plays. And we talk about that sometimes in our meetings. If, like, somebody brought up a guy the other day, it was like, oh, this guy reminds me of player X. Well, it depends. Like, if we pulled this room, half of the room may not let a player X. So in my mind, that's a negative, but this half of the room, it's a positive. So, you got to be careful sometimes when you compare players to different players. So, what you really want to worry about is the players that you picked, not the ones that you didn't pick. You really want to hit on the ones that you pick, and that's really what's most important.
How unique is this draft at the top? There seems to be a lot of non-premium positions compared to the past, and how much does that change or maybe slightly alter the approach?
Yes, this draft of exactly. I mean, you're dead on with what you said there in terms of maybe it's not the the surplus position or the higher paying positions when you get into free agency or outside the building may be the best players in this draft. So again, goes back to where we are roster wise and being in a position to take the best player available regardless of position. So. Yeah, in a perfect world, when you look at the 5th pick and then you slot in whatever position you want, like what that player is going to make at the 5th pick, where does that slot him in an APY right off the bat? Okay, well, it's a 5th pick and it's a corner. Where's that? 5th pick and a receiver. Okay, he's 40th. 5th pick and a running back. Maybe it's 11. 5th pick and a tackle. I mean, you start going through it. You would like to have, again, those positions outside the building that you're going to pay a lot of money, to get that surplus value. But, that just may not be the case this year, which is fine. We're going to evaluate every position, every player, and, obviously do what's best for us.
Running back, that would put it around 10th, I think, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, so that's the point.
How much would that affect your thought process on taking a player at that position?
We're going to take the best player available, Jordan, and we're not going to rule any of those out. But yeah, your point in the original question, that's part of our thought process when we go through the evaluation as you're building the team. You do go through those scenarios.
Joe, have you got a sense that, from the owners' meetings and talking to people, there'll be more of this later on, that more teams will want to go down or up? Do you get a sense that it's going to be, as you said, this is not a normal draft. There's one quarterback, and so are more teams going to want to go down? And are there enough teams to want to go up? It takes 2.
Yeah, and it depends. We always think, and everybody sees the board. Their board looks just like ours. You assume the way you're looking at it. So, yeah, I mean, at some point there's a Mendoza line where maybe there's a drop off, and the player at 8 may be the same type of player you can get at 18. So maybe there's really not a big difference in those. So, yeah, at some point, some teams may want to, move back because of that, but at the same time, they might want to get into that top 8 or 10 or 11 or 12, whoever that is for that particular team, may want to get inside of that to get, a significantly better player potentially. So, we've gotten a couple calls of, teams sniffing around about potentially coming up, and again, we'll just have to wait and see who's there when we pick. I don't really foresee us moving back before next Thursday night.
And do you think you don't have a 3rd round pick? There's a good reason why. But does the quest for more picks, you always want more picks, is the quest for more picks really strong in you this year, if it's possible to do that?
Yeah, Paul, I would always like more picks, but it'll be situational. We're not going to walk away from an impact player or a good player that we're convicted on that we like, to pick up, an extra pick or a couple extra picks. So case by case basis, if there's, if you move back 3 or 4 spots and there's five guys you like, you get an extra pick. Absolutely. If it's a guy you're convicted on, and maybe there's a big drop off from, let's say it's a corner, and there's a big drop off, maybe 2 rounds to the next corner. You maybe don't roll the dice in those situations. You just take the player, so you don't miss out. So certainly would like more picks, but don't want to walk away from good players either.
Joe, you talked about in the past the process by which you set up possible trade percentages in 1st round, 2nd round. What about the pressure involved when you're on that phone? I mean, what confidence do you have in your process that allows you to do that and to know you only have a limited time and you've got to kind of pull that trigger? You've moved up, you've moved back. I mean, I think it's 5 trades on draft day since you took over as general manager. What is that like? What is that process like?
Yeah, have a really good team in there. Between Brandon Brown, Tim McDonald, Dennis Hickey. They have the trade calculators, and Dawn will be in there this year with the trade calculator assistant of that. So those guys are always, and Dawn will be thinking of trades. If teams call, I'll say it out loud. They'll go through the different charts. Does it make sense? Should we ask for more? So we'll have conversations while we're on the clock going through some of those different scenarios. And then we'll be able to make a decision. It's easier in the 1st round a lot of times because the rounds are you get a longer time to make the pick, and then you're having these strategy meetings leading up to that. 2nd, 3rd round it happens a little bit more rapid. So again, just having a really good group of people around me that can help take the information and get it in front of me as quickly as possible so we can make the best decision.
Is there pressure involved for you to kind of pull that trigger in that situation, just personally?
To make
the deal. I mean, you have the final call, right, in that situation, and you've done it. Like I said, I think it's 5 or 6 times on draft night. I mean, it's
and for example, last year with Jackson, that was something. We actually had a deal in place with another team, and until they actually accept it when you're on the clock, that ended up falling through. So we kind of had trade parameters in place. We knew what the value was, and we pulled the trigger on that to move up and to get Jackson. But a lot of the thought process and the planning and strategy going into that had been done beforehand. So it's almost like you play the game before the game. Especially in the first and second. Going in that early pick in the second round, you've got all day. For the first round pick, we've had months to prepare for. So we'll be ready.
Do you think, based on what you guys do with the 5th pick, how many different directions do you have for that second round pick of where you guys could go?
We could get back up into 1 if we did this. This probably a week ago. I looked at it. We could get back into 1, but not very far. We don't have a 3rd, so if we wanted to go back in 1, it might be a little bit more difficult. But it's not out of the question. We could do it, but we'd have to give up some picks. But could certainly go back. Typically top of the 2nd, top of the 4th, where we are on Saturday. You'll get people, they sit around all night and they look at the board and there's somebody they have to have, and you could typically move back from the early parts of those rounds, and day 2 and day 4 you got a pretty good chance of doing that.
Based on what you do with number 5, how many different sort of directions could you go with that, filling another need there?
Yeah, and we've set it up, and for those of you who've been here, so we can go play. We could go play a game on Thursday. Are we as good as we want to be? Can we still add to? Certainly. We had. I know it was reported. We had DJ Reader in here yesterday. We've had some people come in on visits. There's still players that are on the street that were free agents this year that are available. So again, just try not to back yourself in a corner where it's a need. It's where mistakes can be made. Maybe the guy's really a 3rd round player, and you take him in the 2nd because that's the last one left, and that sets the expectation of the level the player is supposed to be playing at. So to the best of our ability, just try not to back ourselves into a corner where you have to draft for need.
Based on your running back situation, would you consider a 20-year-old running back who combines speed, power, and vision at number 5?
We like our running back room now. Scat had a really good rookie year. Tyrone Tracy's been a 1,000-yard all-purpose guy the last 2 years. Devin's back. Turbo. Eric Gray coming off the injury. So, we'll see what happens on draft night. But like the room the way it's constructed right now.
Trying to steal my running back thunder here.
I know you love the running backs.
So I'll ask. To use a premium pick on a running back, would that be saying that it was a mistake 2 years ago to devalue the running back position, or what's changed since then that it would be worth using a valuable asset on it?
Yeah, I would say we're in a different place. We have a rookie on a quarterback deal, a quarterback on a rookie deal. At that time, our offensive line was different. We didn't have Jermaine Illuminor. We didn't have John Runyon. We didn't have Brian Burns. We didn't have Malik Neighbors. So the roster was different, and there's a time and a place, in terms of the roster construction. I like where we are right now from the young nucleus. And that was a little part of the thought process is, hey, we need to build this thing, and it started up front. And last year we were 5th in the league in rushing. We were 5th in the league in rushing a year ago. So I think mission accomplished. We upgraded the offensive line and improved the run game. And I thought we had to start by doing that up front, and we did that. So again, we're going to look for the best player regardless of position. And I'm excited about where the roster is right now based on what we did in free agency. The prospects of what we can get here a week from now, Coach Harbaugh, the new staff, some of the new leadership in the building. I like the trajectory we're on.
When you look at a player like Jeremiah Love, do you look at him as a straight running back, though, or do you look at it as an offensive weapon? How do you kind of look at a player like that when they have the skill set that he obviously
an offensive
has?
Weapon. Yeah, he's an offensive weapon. I mean, he's not just a running back. He can play on 3rd down. You can split him out. He can catch the ball. So certainly an offensive weapon.
You talked about best player available, but just given how much Harbaugh's talked about stopping the run as a priority, how tempting is it to look at the defensive guys and say, hey, a player like maybe Styles or Downs or someone like that could be a potential at 5, just to say, hey, we want to continue to upgrade the defense a little bit more?
Yeah, and that wouldn't be out of the question. I mean, those are really good football players, and those are the conversations we're having right now. Like, hey, we like all these guys, but you got to pick one, and a couple of them are going to be there. So we're working on stacking that right now. But you speak of Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs, like. Talk about talented defense. We've watched a lot of Ohio State defensive film the last couple of months. A lot of good football players from top to bottom on that defense, and those are two of the key players on that defense that we looked at. So certainly guys that we've talked a lot about and think very highly of.
So you spent 4 years with one head coach and kind of trying to figure out where your philosophy is and what his is, and trying to get him the players. This is a new head coach, obviously a big profile head coach. So how has that gone? And could your 6 players or 7 players that you draft be more of a reflection on what his vision is for what the roster is? Because you want to get him the players that he can do well with.
Yeah, the best way for this to work, regardless of the organization of all 32, is there be a collaborative effort and be on the same page. So the early returns on that, it's been great. Like, we've had a lot of fun. He's passionate. Coach Harbaugh's passionate about the draft. I'm passionate about the draft. My staff's passionate about it. So just the ongoing football conversation, sitting in a film room with him, whether it's walking through the board or watching the film, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. We spent a lot of time together, working through not just first rounders, second rounders. I mean, he's passionate about it. Like, he knows about fourth and fifth rounders. He's sending me text messages asking about maybe undrafted free agents. Where he saw an article or an agent might have texted him. So he's really passionate about the draft, and it's been a lot of fun being in these meetings and watching film with him. And it's going to be a collaborative effort. Like, we're going to be on the same page. We're working towards that. By next Thursday, when we get to the first round, we'll all be on the same page.
Your vision for what a player is and his is similar, because sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, I want this, and you don't. That's not your priority.
Yeah. It's pretty simple. We joke around, like, just good football players. That's not overcomplicated, and we joke about that all the time. Just take good football players, and that's philosophically we're aligned on that.
To do more at the guard position. Van Roten is still on the street, right?
Yeah, correct.
You need to do more.
Yeah, we'll see. Again, we've still got the draft. There's people on the street. Greg Van Roten, as you mentioned, still on the street. So one of the cool things about having a new coach is we get to be on the field, next week. So we'll get to see some of those, some of the new guys move around, which will be exciting. But not just offensive line. We're always going to be looking to upgrade the O-line, D-line, every position really. Like I said, we brought some guys in earlier this week, and we'll continue to do so. But again, Daniel started multiple games for the Ravens over the last couple years. Evan started games, Stinney started games. We've got placeholders in there, guys that have done it will compete. Azudu, get an opportunity inside at guard, but we'll also continue to look outside the building as well as the draft coming up.
When you look at this draft in general, where do you see the strengths in the middle rounds positionally? Day 2 into maybe probably early day 3.
Yeah, I would say the outside backers. I mean, there's some depth there at the outside backers. I would say wide receivers a position of depth, and then the corner position. I think in those mid rounds, those guys typically get pushed up. So I think you'll see some guys go from those positions there.
So you've talked about in the past the idea of when you're setting your board, and then maybe there's a bump for need or positional value, that kind of thing. Have you kept your philosophy and how you put together the board with your team, with the new coaching staff and the new head coach and John's input?
Yeah, we're going through that stuff now, and he's asking questions because it's first time. He's done something one way for 18 years. So we've had constant communication throughout the process. When I was okay, here's how our meetings go. Because there's also I need to get to where I need to get to. So here's my process to get me where I need to get to draft day. What do you need to get where you need to get to, where you're comfortable? And we kind of merge the calendars to get us to where we need to be next Thursday. But philosophically, there's really not much difference from what they did in Baltimore and how we our process to get to draft day here.